Friends, welcome to the channel. Pay close attention, because what we are witnessing right now could mark a defining before and after in the political history of the United States. How often does a sitting or former president openly confront the nation's most powerful federal law enforcement agency? What happens when the authority of the FBI collides head-on with the ambitions of the presidency? And most importantly, what does this moment reveal about power, accountability, and the future of American democracy? The situation centers on an unprecedented confrontation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has taken a step that has sent shockwaves through Washington and far beyond it, formally seeking legal action that could lead to the imprisonment of Donald Trump. The move has immediately triggered a fierce response from Trump himself, who has framed the investigation as a direct attack not only against him, but against the millions of Americans who continue to support him. What began as a legal process has now escalated into open political rebellion, with Trump positioning himself as a target of what he calls a hostile federal establishment. This moment did not arise in a vacuum. It follows a series of investigations, indictments, and court battles that have steadily narrowed the space between Trump and the criminal justice system. According to officials familiar with the process, the FBI's actions are tied to alleged violations that go beyond technical legal disputes and strike at the heart of federal authority. For many Americans, this is no longer an abstract legal debate. It is a confrontation that raises fundamental questions about whether any individual, regardless of power or popularity, is above the law. Across the country, the public reaction has been swift and deeply divided. In major cities, demonstrations have erupted both in support of the FBI's actions and in defense of Trump. In Washington, New York, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Dallas, crowds have gathered holding signs that reflect two sharply opposing realities. Some demand accountability, chanting that the rule of law must prevail. Others accuse federal institutions of corruption, warning that the investigation represents a dangerous politicization of justice. The streets have become a mirror of a nation split down the middle, with trust in institutions hanging in the balance. Social media platforms and talk shows have amplified the tension, turning legal filings into political weapons. Supporters of Trump describe the investigation as a witch hunt designed to eliminate him from the political arena. Critics counter that the strength of a democracy lies precisely in its willingness to investigate its most powerful figures. The emotional momentum is unmistakable, and the stakes feel existential for both sides. This is no longer just about Donald Trump. It is about whose version of America will define the future. Inside the federal government, the pressure is equally intense. Officials have been forced to walk a narrow line, defending the independence of law enforcement while facing accusations of bias and abuse of power. Reports of internal disagreements have surfaced, suggesting that not all agencies or officials agree on how aggressively the case should proceed. Some fear that moving forward will deepen political polarization. Others argue that backing down would permanently damage the credibility of the justice system. Trump's response has been defiant. Through statements, rallies, and legal filings, he has accused the FBI and the Department of Justice of overreach and political motivation. He has urged his allies in Congress to investigate federal agencies, turning the tables and placing law enforcement itself under scrutiny. This strategy has transformed a legal battle into a full-scale institutional clash, with Congress, the executive branch, and the justice system increasingly entangled in open conflict. That conflict is now playing out on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers are debating the limits of executive power, the independence of federal investigations, and the role of congressional oversight. Some members of Congress are calling for hearings and subpoenas, demanding transparency from the FBI. Others warn that such actions risk undermining active investigations and setting a dangerous precedent. Legal experts are divided, with constitutional questions looming large over every move. At the core of this struggle is a fundamental tension embedded in the American system: the balance between democratic leadership and the rule of law. The Constitution grants significant authority to both elected officials and independent institutions, but it also assumes a shared commitment to norms and restraint. What happens when those norms erode? When institutions are forced to defend themselves not only in courtrooms, but in the court of public opinion? The implications extend far beyond U.S. borders. Allies and adversaries alike are closely watching how the United States handles this crisis. For decades, American leaders have promoted the rule of law and institutional independence as cornerstones of democratic governance. Now, foreign governments are asking whether the United States can live up to those principles at home. Any perception of political interference or institutional collapse could weaken America's global standing and embolden authoritarian narratives abroad. International markets and diplomatic channels are already reacting to the uncertainty. Political instability at the highest levels of U.S. leadership raises concerns about policy continuity, security commitments, and economic decision-making. In a world already marked by conflict and volatility, the possibility of a prolonged constitutional crisis in the United States adds another layer of global risk. Yet, amid the noise and the power struggles, it is important to return to the human and symbolic center of this moment. For many Americans, particularly those from immigrant and marginalized communities, this confrontation resonates deeply. These communities have long experienced the sharp edge of federal authority, often without the protections or resources available to the powerful. They are watching closely to see whether accountability applies equally or whether power once again shields those at the top. The symbolism is powerful. A former president openly challenging the FBI forces the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, identity, and justice. Is allegiance owed to an individual or to the institutions designed to serve the public? Can a democracy survive when trust in those institutions fractures along partisan lines? History offers warnings, but no easy answers. Moments like this have tested other democracies, sometimes strengthening them through accountability, and sometimes weakening them through division. The outcome depends not only on court rulings or elections, but on the collective choices of leaders and citizens alike. As this critical week unfolds, legal decisions, congressional actions, and public demonstrations will continue to shape the trajectory of this crisis. The consequences will not be limited to one man or one agency. They will influence how power is exercised, how laws are enforced, and how future generations understand democracy itself. We will continue to monitor every development closely. This is not just a political story or a legal battle. It is a test of institutions, principles, and the social contract that binds a nation together. For communities that cannot afford to be misinformed or ignored, staying alert and informed is not a luxury. It is a necessity.